They said my wife was in West Africa, leading a medical mission, treating patients, saving lives. I was proud of her. 3 months later, she came home, pregnant, exhausted, and claiming she'd been exposed to a deadly virus. I rushed her to the hospital, but when the test came back, it wasn't Ebola. It was chlamydia and gonorrhea. That's when I stopped being a husband and started being an investigator. Because my wife wasn't fighting disease, she was the infection. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 41 years old, a former Marine, now working as the head of cybersecurity at a major hospital in Seattle. I'm the kind of man who believes in systems, in loyalty, in keeping things secure. My wife, Dr. Tessa Cole, was the same, or at least I thought she was. Tessa was an infectious disease specialist, brilliant, fearless, respected. She'd built her reputation on going where others wouldn't. War zones, outbreak regions, refugee camps. When she told me she'd been chosen for a 3-month humanitarian medical mission in West Africa, I was proud of her. I helped her pack, drove her to the airport, and told her what I always did before every deployment. Do what you do best, save lives. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. She sent photos of clinics, dusty villages, and children smiling through bandages. She posted updates about fighting disease on the front lines. Every picture looked perfect, maybe too perfect. Then, the calls stopped coming as often. She'd text, "Busy day," or "Bad signal." Once when I tried a video chat, she said, "No reception here." But the next morning, she posted a filtered sunset photo from her hotel balcony. Something didn't add up. Still, I told myself she was just tired, overwhelmed. I buried my doubts under pride and faith in her, in us. 3 months later, she came home. But she wasn't the same woman I'd said goodbye to. Her once confident posture was replaced by nervous glances and short tempers. She barely touched me, claiming she was still adjusting from the mission. A week later, she collapsed in her lab. I got the call while running a server audit at work. I broke every traffic law on the way to the ER. When I arrived, Tessa was pale, sweating, shaking. She looked terrified, not of dying, but being found out. The attending physician pulled me aside into the hallway, his voice cautious. "Mr. Cole, your wife's blood work came back." I braced for the worst. Ebola, malaria, something deadly and exotic. But the doctor hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "It's not a tropical virus," he said slowly. "She's pregnant, and she's tested positive for chlamydia and gonorrhea." For a full 10 seconds, I didn't move. The words bounced off my skull like static. Pregnant? STDs. I actually laughed, a hollow, disbelieving sound. When I finally walked back into her room, she couldn't look at me. She just whispered, "It's not what you think." But I wasn't thinking. I was remembering. Every late-night text, every missed call, every excuse. That was the moment the Marine in me woke up again. I'd spent my life defending systems from breaches. But this was personal. And if there's one thing I know better than anyone, it's how to trace a lie to its source. I sat in the car for almost an hour that night, engine running, headlights off, just staring into the darkness. My wife, a doctor who preached integrity, ethics, and compassion, had come home from a supposed humanitarian mission, carrying 2 STDs and a baby that wasn't mine. The next morning, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, one last time. Over coffee, I said quietly, "Tess, the hospital ran your labs. They found something." Her hand froze midair. The spoon clinked against the mug. Her eyes darted up to mine, wide and calculating, the same way a suspect looks at a cop who already knows the truth. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "You tested positive for 2 infections." Her face drained of color. Then she launched into a rehearsed line. "It must have been exposure. From a patient. We wore protective gear, but maybe—" I stopped listening halfway through. Her voice cracked, but it wasn't guilt. It was fear. Fear of being caught, not of what she'd done. That night, when she finally fell asleep, I sat in my office, opened my laptop, and did what I do best: track, trace, uncover. Cybersecurity teaches you one immutable truth. Every lie leaves a trail. First, I check her hospital login history. No international travel authorization. Her ID badge had no record of departure for the medical mission. Then I accessed the corporate flight registry for humanitarian workers. Her name had been removed 2 days before the supposed departure. I moved her credit card history. That's when the illusion cracked completely. Her transactions weren't from Guinea or even Africa. They were from Portland, Oregon. Hotel rooms, high-end restaurants, spa treatments, jewelry stores, a rental charge for an Airbnb under the name Teresa Lane. My wife hadn't been saving lives. She'd been living one, a double one. But I needed confirmation, proof that no one could deny. So, I called in a favor. Mason Goley, a retired detective I'd once helped catch a data thief, now worked as a private investigator. Within a week, he sent me a USB drive labeled, "You're going to want a stiff drink before this." I poured one. The footage started with her checking into a Portland Airbnb. Alone. Then, another car arrived. Out stepped Dr. Owen Grady, cardiologist, mid-40s, married, 2 kids, and her colleague at the hospital. They embraced, kissed, went inside. The timestamps didn't lie. The entire 3 months of her supposed mission were spent with him. But that wasn't the worst part. In one of Mason's clips, Tessa and Owen attended what was labeled a medical advancement retreat. But Mason's surveillance said otherwise. No lectures, no labs, just doctors and nurses checking into luxury cabins, couples swapping rooms, champagne flowing. The retreat was organized by Dr. Alexis Voss, head of psychiatry, and, apparently, head of a secret swingers club disguised as a continuing education program. And Tessa? She wasn't just attending. She was hosting. She handled guest registrations, coordinated pairing events, even collected membership fees via a dummy LLC. I sat back in my chair, numb. This wasn't just infidelity. It was fraud, corruption, and professional suicide wrapped in designer lingerie. I thought about the night she told me she was leaving for Africa. The tears, the noble speeches about helping the helpless. Now I knew what those tears really meant. Guilt, not compassion. As the USB finished playing, Mason's voice came through in a brief audio note. "She's in deep, Nate. And not just with one guy. Voss has been blackmailing the members, your wife included." I leaned back, staring at the wall of surveillance stills, my wife laughing, drinking, lying in bed with another man. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt focus. If she could lie so flawlessly, I could expose her just as precisely. And I was going to make sure that when her perfect little facade collapsed, it wouldn't be in private. It would be broadcast. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even accuse her. Because rage, when unleashed too early, loses its power. I wanted her to feel it, the same way I had felt it. The slow, creeping dread of knowing your world was about to implode. So I planned my counterstrike with precision. First, I called Julia Grady, Owen's wife. I met her once, years ago, at a hospital fundraiser. Sharp woman, elegant, the kind who smiled politely while secretly memorizing every face in the room. When I told her what I discovered, she didn't gasp. She just said quietly, "I know." Julia had been gathering her own evidence for months. Hidden camera footage, messages from Owen's encrypted phone, even screenshots of payments to the so-called medical society. When I showed her what I had on Tessa, the partnership was instant. 2 betrayed spouses. One common goal. We spent the next 2 weeks building a digital dossier. Methodical, detailed, and airtight. Every photo, every message, every transfer labeled education grant or research expense was actually hush money funneled to Dr. Alexis Voss, the club's puppet master. I traced the money through a shell company registered under Voss's name. Julia cross-verified the members, a dozen doctors, all married, all complicit. And there she was, my wife, listed as coordinator. We didn't just have a scandal. We had a career-ending detonation. Then, almost poetically, the hospital announced its annual charity gala, the Riverside Hearts Foundation dinner. A night of champagne, donors, and media coverage. The event was live-streamed. And the theme? Heroes in medicine. When Tessa told me she wanted me there for appearances, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Of course, I said. Wouldn't miss it. I spent that entire day preparing. Not my speech, but the show. A flash drive. A backup cloud link. A preloaded slideshow queued on the AV system. Labeled simply Gala Presentation, Final. When we arrived, she looked perfect. Elegant dress, diamond earrings, a confident smirk. She kissed me in front of the cameras like the loving doctor's wife she pretended to be. She had no idea that kiss was a goodbye. The night went on. Speeches, applause, clinking glasses. And then, the hospital director stepped up to the podium. Tonight, we honor those who dedicate their lives to healing others. That was my cue. I walked up beside him, calm, composed, the perfect professional. Excuse me, Dr. Heller, I said, taking the microphone. Before we celebrate our heroes, I think it's time we meet the real ones and the monsters hiding among them. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. Cameras turned toward me. Then the slideshow began. At first, people thought it was part of the event. Photos of hospital staff, smiling in scrubs. Then came the next slide. Doctors drinking at luxury cabins, labeled medical retreat. Hotel bills under the hospital's account. Videos of couples checking into rooms together. And then, the group photo. Tessa, Owen, and Voss, raising champagne glasses with the caption, "To keeping it between us." Gasps spread through the hall. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Then came the payments, screenshots of bank transfers titled, "Continuing Education Fees," followed by photos Mason had taken. Tessa and Owen together at the Airbnb, laughing, kissing, and finally, the one in the hotel bed. The room went silent. You could hear a glass shatter in the back. Owen shot up from his table, face red, eyes wild. "You bastard," he roared, charging the stage. I didn't flinch. Years of combat training kicked in. I sidestepped as he swung. His fist sliced air. I caught his arm, twisted, and shoved him back, gently enough not to break it, but hard enough to humiliate him. Gasps turned into chaos. Donors shouted. Reporters scrambled for cameras. Security rushed in, dragging Owen away, shouting profanities. And then, the spotlight turned, literally, to Tessa. She stood motionless, hands trembling, face ghost white. The crowd stared. Her peers, her subordinates, her boss. Every eye burned into her. I stepped closer to the mic, my voice steady. For 3 months, my wife told me she was saving lives in West Africa. Turns out, the only thing she was spreading was lies. Her knees buckled. She reached out as if to stop me, but I was already walking off stage. Behind me, the screen froze on the final slide, a quote she'd once posted on Instagram. "Integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching." Only now, everyone was watching. And this time, there was no way to save her. By sunrise, the story had gone viral. Every major network ran the same headline. Hospital scandal exposes secret doctor sex club. The footage from a gala, Owen charging me, Tessa's frozen face, the slideshow, had been clipped, shared, and dissected across every social media platform. Commentators called it the Medgate affair. The hospital's PR department went into lockdown, and by 9 a.m., every staff member involved, including my wife, was suspended pending investigation. When I came home that afternoon, she was waiting on the porch, still in last night's dress, makeup streaked from tears. "Nate, please," she whispered, voice shaking. "We can fix this." I was lost, confused. It just got out of control. I stepped past her, calm, methodical. "No, Tess," I said. "You weren't confused. You were entertained." She followed me inside, rambling about pressure, loneliness, needing validation. She said Voss manipulated her, said Owen promised to protect her, said she didn't know how to stop. When she finally paused to breathe, I opened my laptop and pulled up her financials. "Funny," I said, scrolling. "You made $12,000 in donations to the club. That's not pressure, Tess. That's a subscription plan." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then the dam broke. She started sobbing, deep, guttural cries that echoed off the kitchen walls. I should have felt something, pity maybe, but all I felt was exhaustion. Finally, she whispered the thing I already knew. "The baby isn't yours." I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. "Whose is it?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Owen's." My jaw tightened. She tried to explain how she planned to pass it off as a miracle, a blessing after her hard mission abroad. The words barely registered. I walked to the window, watching the rain streak the glass. "You were going to lie to me for the rest of my life," I said quietly. To my face. Every day. She took a step forward. I thought if I could just come home, if I could just be a good wife again. I turned, cutting her off. You don't come back from this, Tess. Not from this. She crumbled into a chair, covering her face. That afternoon, Julia came over. We sat at my dining table with Mason's files and the hospital's internal memos. Everything was there: names, transactions, chat logs, video clips. We packaged the full, unedited evidence and sent it to the state medical board, the press, and, for good measure, the IRS. By evening, the fallout had begun. Dr. Owen Grady's medical license was revoked within 24 hours. His wife filed for divorce and released a public statement condemning his predatory behavior. Dr. Alexis Voss was arrested for blackmail, fraud, and extortion. Her fake educational retreats exposed as fronts for illegal activity. And Tessa, my wife, was fired. Her name scrubbed from every hospital website. Her research grants revoked. The medical community she'd worshipped turned its back on her. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Then, on a Wednesday morning, she came to collect her things. The house was almost empty, just furniture and the echo of what used to be our life. She moved slowly, touching photos, tracing her fingers over the mantel like a mourner at a grave. When she finally turned to me, her eyes were hollow. "You destroyed me," she said softly. I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw it. The arrogance gone, the superiority stripped away. What was left wasn't a monster. It was something worse, a coward who'd built her life on lies and expected applause for it. "No," I said quietly. "You self-destructed, Tess. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see." She flinched like I'd hit her. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out the door without another word. I watched her car disappear down the street. No tears, no rage. Just silence. And for the first time in months, I felt peace. Because the truth wasn't just out there, it was everywhere. And there was no going back to the shadows she'd lived in. By nightfall, the news anchors were already calling it one of the biggest medical scandals in state history. But for me, it wasn't about headlines. It was about closure. And I'd finally found it. Months passed. What began as a scandal at a single hospital became a national story. Reporters called it the Medgate affair. Talk shows, podcasts, medical journals. Everyone wanted to dissect it. The headlines were merciless. Top infectious disease doctor exposed in secret sex club scandal. Hospital ethics board collapses amid affair allegations. And there it was, her name, Dr. Tessa Cole. Everywhere. Owen's wife, Julia, finalized her divorce. She donated half of his assets to medical ethics research, poetic justice. Dr. Alexis Voss pled guilty to fraud, extortion, and blackmail. She took a plea deal, trading her luxury lifestyle for a 6x8 cell. Owen lost his medical license, his family, and his home. And Tessa, she vanished from the profession completely. As for me, I got exactly what I wanted: clarity. The court awarded me full control of our joint assets and the house. I sold both. Money didn't matter anymore. Peace of mind did. Then, one day, she reached out. It was a plain email. "I'd like to meet. Please." I almost ignored it. But curiosity, that old enemy, got the better of me. We met at a small cafe off Fifth Avenue. Rain tapped against the windows as she walked in, unrecognizable. Her hair was messy. The confidence that once lit her face was gone. She sat down slowly, clutching her cup like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She looked at me, the man she'd betrayed, humiliated, destroyed, and said softly, "Do you hate me?" For a long moment, I didn't answer. I studied her face, searching for the woman I'd married. She wasn't there anymore, just the shell she'd left behind. Finally, I said, "I used to." I sipped my coffee. "Now, I just pity you." She nodded, eyes wet. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I thought I wanted freedom, excitement, something new. But I ruined everything." I didn't argue. I didn't comfort her. Those are luxuries she'd lost the right to. Then she said, almost trembling, "Please, don't tell our families about the pregnancy." I looked her dead in the eye. "I'll tell the truth when I'm ready. You don't get to dictate that anymore." She broke then, fully. Shoulders shaking, tears streaming down. I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, and said the last words I'd ever speak to her. "You were the infection, Tess. I just administer the cure. The next week, I packed what little I care to keep and left Seattle. I moved south, to a small coastal town in Oregon where no one knew my name. The sea was rough, the mornings cold, but the air was clean. Honest. I took a teaching job at a community college, lecturing about cybersecurity and digital ethics. Fitting, I guess, teaching people how to protect themselves from hidden threats. I started running again. The first few weeks were brutal. My lungs burned. My knees ached, but the pain was good. Cleansing. Every mile I ran, I shed another layer of the past. One evening, I was organizing old files when I found a photo buried in the back of a drawer. Our wedding day. She was radiant, confident, the same confidence that once drew me to her and ultimately destroyed her. I stared at the picture for a long time before setting it in a tin tray in the sink. I struck a match and watched the edges curl, her smile fading into smoke. As the flame flickered, I whispered, "They say revenge doesn't heal pain. Maybe that's true, but it sure disinfects it." Outside, the waves crashed against the rocks, steady and indifferent. I stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the salt air, the cold wind cutting clean through me. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Tessa had built her life on deception, layers of lies stacked on false virtue. I rebuilt mine on truth. Simple, uncompromising. And in the end, I realized something. Justice isn't about destroying someone else's life. It's about reclaiming your own. That night, as the tide rolled in, I stood there, free, unburdened, and whole again, because she lost everything built on lies. And I finally learned how to live in the truth.